My name is Marta and in this Red Gaming Tech video we've got quite a PC focused video for you today, but we do have a small smattering of console news, so it's going to add a bit of flavour. And the first item I want to discuss is actually regarding Sea of Thieves, and there was an update posted by Rare on the Insider forums which shared the minimum specs, or at least the preliminary minimum specs for a Windows 10 PC for the game. But before I get into that, let's discuss something a bit more unusual, because, you know, getting the specs for a PC game is helpful, but obviously common practice. The unusual thing is actually regarding the Xbox One version, and Rare have confirmed that at least their internal Xbox One build now features a FOV slider as part of their effort to maintain balance and parity across the platform, since there is going to be crossplay enabled in the full game. So this probably means that the FOV slider feature is going to be in the final product, and this basically never happens. Now, that is obviously a bit of hyperbole, because it has happened to a handful of games, that being just a few examples: Battlefield 1, Titanfall 2, the Handsome Collection of Borderlands, Doom, and so on. But you know, the handful of games this has happened to is obviously the exception that proves the rule, rather than obviously the common denominator, because it is extremely rare for a console version of a game to get an FOV slider. So I have to give a big, you know, thumbs up to Rare for that one, because it's just a nice feature to have. There's no reason not to have it, and especially if you suffer from simulation sickness, having a wider FOV can actually help it. And obviously tighter FOV games tend to be quite a bit worse for people with that particular problem. So yeah, it's real nice to see. Anyway, let's go through quickly the preliminary minimum specs for Sea of Thieves on PC, shall we? Unsurprisingly, the OS is Windows 10 anniversary. This is going to be a Windows 10 only game. Unsurprisingly, it's going to be requiring an Intel i3 at 2.9 GHz or an AMD FX 6300 at 3.5, an AMD Radeon 7750 or an Nvidia GeForce 650, 4GB of RAM, DX11 and 1GB of VRAM. Now, just to clarify, Rare have actually helpfully said that this is for 720p 30. But even so, these specs are pretty minimal to say the least. But the last thing I want to mention is that you'll need a rather beefy 60 gigs of space. But it's not actually the worst we've seen even this year, so I suppose it's not as bad, but it's still, you know, weighing in quite heavy there on the old hard drive. However, the main thing that I want to discuss in this particular video is actually Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus, as we have the minimum and recommended PC specs, as well as a few PC-specific features have been announced by Machine Games as well. So let's go through the features, and they support something, you know, stuff like uncapped frame rate, which is awesome, 16:10, as well as ultra widescreen 21:9 resolutions. Again, we have an FOV slider, of course. It does go from 70 to 120, but we don't actually know if that means horizontal or vertical, to be honest. So what that means, meh. But it has it, which is good. Not really surprised to see that. It does support up to 4K resolutions, and of course has a whole ton of the usual suite of advanced graphics options like occlusion, reflections, blah 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 blah. And interestingly, I'm sure many of you will find this quite intriguing, is that it was actually built on the Vulkan graphics API. With all that out of the way though, let's move on to the specs, as we have the minimum up first. And this is going to require a Intel Core i7-3770 or an AMD FX 8350 for the CPU, and for the graphics card it's going to need an Nvidia GTX 770 with 4GB of VRAM or an AMD Radeon R9 290 with 4GB, or better of course. RAM is going to start off at 8, hardly surprising, and again hardly surprising, it will need 7, 8.1 or 10 64-bit versions of Windows, and is also going to need 55 gigs worth of space, so actually weighing in a little bit less than Sea of Thieves at the current moment. So, what you really want to know is the recommended, right? Yeah, of course you do. Unsurprisingly, the OS and storage space required does remain the same, but of course we see a rather significant upgrade in the CPU, which will now be an Intel Core i7-4770 or an AMD FX 9370, And of course a jump up as well for the graphics card, requiring a GTX 1060 with 6GB of VRAM, or an AMD Radeon RX 470 with 4GB or better. So definitely meaty for the recommended specs, but are you really surprised? Were you really expecting anything less for this game? You know, the original Wolfenstein, that being the reboot of course, not the original Wolfenstein, required a fair bit of power under the hood, so I'm not exactly surprised to see the sequel following suit. Unfortunately, no frame rate or resolution attached to either of these, but you can kind of take a educated guess as to which one is which. So, not too long until Wolfenstein comes out the day after my birthday. I'm excited, to say the least. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.